I walked into the restaurant to find empty plates and sweating wine glasses. My mother flashed her rehearsed smile. They had not waited for me to eat. They had waited for me to pick up the check, but they did not know I was here to settle a different kind of score. Tonight, they would pay with the exact weapon they had always used to control me. My name is Megan Hartley. I am 33 years old, and for most of my adult life, I have been the invisible infrastructure of my family. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, a city that prides itself on banking and finance, which feels tragically ironic considering my personal life feels like a never-ending audit where the numbers never quite balance in my favor. By day, I am an operations manager at Northbridge Systems. My job is to identify inefficiencies, streamline workflows, and ensure that resources are allocated where they are needed most. I am good at it. I am precise. I am logical. Yet, for reasons I was only just beginning to understand on that humid Tuesday evening, I had never applied those same operational principles to the people who shared my DNA. The invitation had come in the form of a text message from my mother at 4 p.m. It was brief, vague, and designed to look casual. It read, "We are celebrating the anniversary at the Monarch in Uptown. Table is booked for 6. Come whenever you finish work." There was no question mark. There was no request for confirmation. And most importantly, there was the trap hidden in the words, "come whenever," in the language of my family. Come whenever meant that the event would start without me, the decisions would be made without me, and my arrival would be timed perfectly to coincide with the arrival of the bill. I parked my sedan in the overpriced garage a block away from the restaurant. The air in Uptown was heavy, sticking to my skin the moment I stepped out of the climate-controlled car. I checked my watch. It was 7:45. I had left Northbridge Systems exactly 45 minutes ago, rushing through the end-of-day reports, driven by a guilt that had been programmed into me since childhood. I walked briskly past the high-rise banks and the trendy bars, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the pavement. I prepared myself for the usual comments about my workaholism, about how I never made time for family, about how I was always the last one to show up. When I entered the Monarch, the lighting was dim, amber, and expensive. The smell of truffle oil and seared steak hung in the air. The hostess did not need to lead me to the table. I spotted them immediately near the back, nestled in a plush semicircular booth that looked comfortable enough to sleep in. The first thing I noticed was the silence at the table. It was not the comfortable silence of intimacy, it was the satiated silence of consumption. My father was leaning back, his face flushed slightly from the wine. My younger sister, Lila, was scrolling on her phone, a half-eaten dessert pushed to the side. My mother was the first to see me. Her face lit up, not with warmth, but with relief. It was the look a general gives when the supply convoy finally breaks through the lines. "Megan!" she exclaimed, her voice just loud enough to turn a few heads. "You made it. We were just starting to worry." I slid into the empty space on the edge of the booth. The white tablecloth in front of me was pristine, devoid of silverware or a plate. In front of them, the carnage of a 3-course meal was evident. Empty shells of oysters, the T-bone steak bone on my father's plate, the remnants of a chocolate soufflé on Lila's. "Happy anniversary," I said, my voice sounding flatter than I intended. "Sorry I'm late. The quarterly review is coming up at Northbridge." "Always working," Lila said without looking up from her screen. She took a sip of water. "We saved you a bread roll. I think—" She laughed. It was a small, sharp sound. "We actually just finished," my mother said, smoothing the napkin on her lap. She reached out and patted my hand, her skin cool and dry. "We did not want to order for you and have it get cold. You know how picky you can be with textures." I looked at the table. 3 empty wine bottles. Not the house wine, either. I recognized the label. It was a Cabernet that cost $120 a bottle. I did the math in my head instantly. $360 just in liquid courage. The waiter materialized out of the shadows. He was young, professional, and held a small black leather folder in his hand. He looked at my father, then at my mother, and finally, his eyes drifted to me. It was an instinct. Waiters know. They read body language better than therapists. He saw a group of people leaning back, and one person sitting up straight, clutching a purse. He placed the folder in the center of the table. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to drop away, leaving us in a vacuum of expectation. My father suddenly found the crown molding on the ceiling fascinating. He refused to look down. Lila continued to type on her phone, her thumbs moving at a blur, completely disassociating from the reality of the moment. My mother let out a small, theatrical sigh and reached for her purse, but her movements were slow, performative. She opened the clasp, looked inside, and then looked at me with a smile that was terrifyingly benign. "Oh, goodness," she said, chuckling softly. "I seem to have left my main card in my other bag. And your father, well, you know how he is with carrying cash these days." She paused. This was the cue. This was the moment in the script where I was supposed to jump in, eager to save them from embarrassment, eager to purchase their affection for another week. "Megan, honey," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if she were doing me a favor. "You do not mind grabbing this, do you? We can settle up later. It is just easier since you are already here." I felt a cold sensation wash over me, starting at the base of my neck and spreading down to my fingertips. It was not surprise. It was the absolute lack of surprise that froze me. "Settle up later," I repeated. The words tasted like ash. "Don't make it a big deal, Megan," Lila said, finally looking up. Her eyes were narrow, challenging. "It is their 30th anniversary. Try not to ruin the vibe just because you were late." "I was told to come whenever," I said calmly. "Exactly," my father chimed in, his voice gruff, still avoiding my gaze. "We had a lovely time. Don't spoil it with money talk." Money talk. That is what they called it when I hesitated to bleed for them. I looked at the black folder. I knew exactly what was inside. Based on the bottles and the plates, the bill was likely over $600, maybe $700. That was half of my rent. That was 40 hours of labor. In the past, I would have felt panic. I would have felt the desperate need to be the good daughter, the capable one, the one who could solve the problem. I would have paid it to make my mother smile, to make my father proud, to make Lila stop looking at me with that mix of pity and disdain. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, I did not feel panic. I felt like I was at work. I felt like I was looking at a spreadsheet where the numbers did not add up, and I was finally ready to audit the account. I reached out and took the folder. I opened it. $682.50. They had added a 20% gratuity automatically for a party of 6 or more, even though there were only 3 of them eating. They must have told the waiter I was coming to eat too, just to secure the larger table. I pulled my credit card from my wallet. It was a heavy metal card. I placed it in the folder. I did not sigh. I did not complain. I did not ask when later would be, because I knew later did not exist in their calendar. "Thank you, Megan," my mother said, the tension instantly draining from her shoulders. She signaled the waiter. "You are such a blessing." "A blessing," I echoed. I watched the waiter take the card. I watched him walk away. I sat there while they gathered their coats, their laughter returning now that the threat of responsibility had been neutralized. I was not paying for dinner. I was paying for a lesson. I was paying for evidence. Every dollar on that receipt was a data point. When we walked out of the restaurant, the valet was waiting with my parents' car. My father hugged me loosely, a one-armed embrace that conveyed zero warmth. "Drive safe," he said. "See you Sunday?" my mother asked, not waiting for an answer before sliding into the passenger seat. Lila didn't even say goodbye. She just waved over her shoulder as she got into her rideshare. I walked alone to the parking garage. The concrete structure was quiet, the hum of the city muffled by the thick walls. I got into my car and sat there for a long time before starting the engine. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past me, but my mind was replaying the last 10 years. I thought about the pattern. It was always the same. The invite always came after the reservation was made. We decided on Italian, they would say, never asking if I liked Italian. We decided to go to the beach house, they would say, never asking if I could get time off work. And then, the inevitable. We started without you. It was a brilliant strategy, really. By ensuring I arrived late, they established two things. First, that I was the one at fault. I was the one who was too busy, the one who didn't prioritize family. This put me in a moral debt before I even sat down. Second, by the time I arrived, the consumption was over. The joy of the meal, the clinking of glasses, the ordering of appetizers, that belonged to them. I was not a participant in the joy. I was merely the custodial staff arriving to clean up the mess. If I complained, I was petty. It is just money, Megan, they would say. Family is more important. If I refused, I was selfish. After everything we did for you, I merged onto the highway, the speedometer climbing to 65 miles per hour. I thought about the text message again. Come whenever. It wasn't an invitation, it was an invoice. I thought about the unread emails in my work inbox, the deadlines I managed, the complex systems I kept running at Northbridge. I was a professional problem solver. I fixed broken things. And as I took the exit toward my quiet, empty apartment, the realization settled over me with the clarity of a diamond. My family was not just messy. They were not just bad with money. They were a functional, efficient system designed to extract resources from the weakest point of resistance, and I was that point. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the ignition. The silence of the car was heavy, but it was mine. I wasn't paying for this silence. I looked at the receipt I had tucked into the center console. $682.50. It was a lot of money, but as an initial investment in a new project, it was a bargain. I whispered into the dark, making a promise to the woman in the rearview mirror. If this is a system, I am going to break it by pulling the plug. To grow up in the Hartley household was to participate in a play where the script was written before I was born. My role was defined not by who I was, but by what I was not. I was not the star. That role belonged, exclusively and perpetually, to Lila. From the time we were children, the dynamic was carved in stone. Lila was vibrant, chaotic, and demanding. If she wanted the blue cup but got the red one, the house would shake with her screams until the blue cup was produced. My parents would laugh it off, calling her spirited or passionate. I, on the other hand, was the child who accepted the red cup. I drank from it quietly. I washed it when I was done, and for this, I was awarded the most dangerous label a child can receive. I was easy. Megan is just so easy, my mother would tell her friends over glasses of Chardonnay. We never have to worry about her. It sounded like praise. It felt like praise. But as I grew older, I realized it was a cage. Being easy meant I had no needs. It meant I had no right to complain. It meant that my compliance was the baseline requirement for my membership in the family. While Lila was being rewarded for her tantrums with attention and negotiation, I was being rewarded for my silence with more neglect. This invisible contract extended into our financial lives as we became adults. The Hartley brand was built on a foundation of aggressive, relentless optimism that bordered on delusion. My parents loved the aesthetic of wealth far more than the actual accumulation of it. They were people who bought the newest luxury sedan every 2 years but panicked when the property tax bill arrived. They joined the country club for the networking opportunities, but put the membership fees on a credit card with 24% interest. They lived for the check-in, that moment on social media where they could tag themselves at a 5-star resort or a gala opening. The photos were always perfect. My mother in her designer gown, my father in his tailored tuxedo, both of them grinning with the confidence of people who owned the world. But I knew the truth. I knew that the gown was likely going to be returned the next day with the tags tucked in, or that the tickets to the gala were comped by a friend they were currently mooching off of. I became the mortar that held their crumbling brick facade together. It started innocently enough. I was 24, fresh out of college, working my first real job. Megan, honey, my dad had called me one Tuesday morning. I am at the gas station and my card is acting up. Probably a chip malfunction. Can you Venmo me $50 just to fill the tank? I will transfer it back when I get to the office. I sent the $50. He never transferred it back. I never asked. It felt petty to ask for $50 from the man who raised me. Then it was the electricity bill. They double charged us. Can you believe it? We are disputing it. But we need to pay the current balance to keep the lights on for the dinner party tonight. It is just $200. Then it was the car insurance. Then it was a deposit for a vacation rental, because their liquidity was temporarily tied up in investments. The phrase temporarily tied up became the soundtrack of my 20s. I fooled myself for a long time. I told myself I was being a good daughter. I told myself that they were just having a run of bad luck. But bad luck is an event. This was a lifestyle. They were bleeding money to maintain an image for an audience that did not care. And I was the blood bank. The deception forced me to become deceptive in return. By the time I was 30, I was making a very comfortable salary at Northbridge Systems. My career was on a vertical trajectory. I was managing complex budgets, overseeing teams of 40 people, and receiving bonuses that could have paid off my parents' credit card debt in a single stroke. But I never told them. To my family, I was just a mid-level administrator scraping by. I wore simple clothes when I visited them. I drove a reliable, 4-year-old sedan, despite being able to afford a luxury SUV. I never talked about my raises. I never mentioned the stock options. I hid my success because I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that if they knew the true number of my net worth, their requests would stop being requests and start being demands. They viewed my money not as my property, but as a family resource that had been unfairly allocated to the wrong person. If I had money, and they needed money, then logically, in their twisted ecosystem, I was holding on to their money. This brings me to Ethan. Ethan Cole entered my life 3 years ago, and for the first time, someone turned on the lights in the dark room where I had been living. Ethan is an architect. He deals in structures, in load-bearing walls, in things that stand up because the math works. He is quiet, observant, and possesses a devastatingly sharp bullshit detector. He met my parents 6 months into our relationship. We met them for brunch, naturally. They chose a place with bottomless mimosas and a $40 Eggs Benedict. I watched Ethan watch them. He didn't say much. He listened as my father bragged about a massive deal that was just around the corner. He watched my mother critique the waiter's shoes. He watched Lila order the most expensive thing on the menu, take 2 bites, and push it away. And he watched me. He watched me shrink. He watched me apologize for the waiter's delay. He watched me reach for the check before the waiter had even fully placed it on the table, conditioned by years of trauma to avoid the awkward pause. On the drive home that day, Ethan was quiet. "They are nice," I offered weakly. "They are predators, Megan," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was just factual, like he was noting that a roof was leaking. "That is a strong word," I defended, though my heart wasn't in it. "You are the backup generator," he continued, keeping his eyes on the road. "They run the house on full power, lights blazing, AC blasting with the windows open, and when they blow a fuse, they do not change their behavior. They just plug into you, and you let them, because you think that is what love is." He was right. I was the backup plan. I was the plan B that made plan A possible. I began to notice the timing of their invitations. They never called me when they were planning the event. They called me when the event was finalized. "We are going to the beach for the long weekend. We booked the big house," my mom would say. "There is a pull-out couch in the den if you want to come down." The pull-out couch. Lila got the master suite. My parents got the ocean view. I got the pull-out couch in the den, but I was expected to bring the groceries for the weekend. The pattern was absolute. I was invited to the execution of the plan, never the conception, because if I was part of the planning, I might suggest a cheaper hotel. I might suggest cooking at home. I might introduce logic into their fantasy. And they did not want logic. They wanted a financier who kept her mouth shut. The night of the anniversary dinner at the Monarch was the culmination of this dynamic, but the cracks had started showing weeks before. I had been over at their house, a sprawling colonial they could not afford to heat properly, helping my mom set up her new iPad. My father was in the other room, talking loudly on the phone. "Don't worry about it," I heard him say. "I will get the deposit to you by Monday. 100%. The funds are clearing." I knew that tone. It was the salesman tone. The tone of a man selling a promise he couldn't keep. When I walked into the kitchen, my mother was looking at travel brochures for a cruise around the Mediterranean. "Isn't this gorgeous?" she asked, pointing to a picture of a ship that looked like a floating city. "Your father and I deserve a break. It has been such a stressful year." "Mom," I said, cautiously. "Dad sounds stressed on the phone. Is everything okay with the business?" She waved her hand dismissively, a gesture adorned with a diamond ring that I knew for a fact had been refinanced twice. "Oh, you know your father. He just likes to make deals sound dramatic. We are fine. Actually, we were thinking about booking the suite with the balcony. It is $5,000, but you only live once, right?" "Right," I said. $5,000? "We might need you to put the deposit on your card just to hold the reservation," she said, not looking up from the brochure. "Just until Dad's transfer comes through on Monday. You know how slow the banks are." There it was, the hook. "I don't think I can do that right now." "Mom," I lied. "I have a lot of expenses coming up." For a split second, the mask slipped. Her face didn't crumple in disappointment. It hardened in irritation. "Megan," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "it is just a hold. Don't be difficult. You know we always pay you back." They never paid me back. Not really. They paid me back in guilt. They paid me back in the privilege of being allowed to sit at their table, on the pull-out couch, in the corner of their lives. That interaction had stayed with me. It was vibrating in my bones when I walked into the Monarch. Ethan had asked me a question the night before the dinner. We were sitting on our balcony, drinking tea. "Why do you think they do it?" he asked. "Why do they invite you if they know you are just going to sit there and pay?" "Because they need the money," I answered. "No," Ethan shook his head. "If they just needed money, they could ask for a loan. They invite you to the dinner because they know something about you. They know you are terrified of a scene. They know that if the check comes and nobody moves, you will die of embarrassment before you let the waiter stand there for more than 10 seconds. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "They are not banking on your generosity. Megan, they are banking on your shame. They know you will pay to keep their secret. You are paying to maintain the illusion that they are the kind of people who can afford a $600 dinner, and that you are the kind of daughter who is happy to treat them." His words replayed in my head as I drove home from the Monarch, leaving the city behind. The pain wasn't the $682. I could make that money back in a day and a half of work. The pain was the realization that my value to them was entirely logistical. I was an ATM with a pulse. I was a credit card with a first name. And the worst part? They were so confident. They were so utterly sure that Megan, the easy one, the sensible one, would never dare to crack the porcelain perfection of their public image. They believed I would bankrupt myself before I would let a stranger think we were dysfunctional. I pulled into my parking spot and killed the engine. The darkness of the garage felt protective. They were right about the old Megan. The old Megan would have swallowed the bile and paid the bill and smiled for the photo. But they hadn't met the version of me that was currently sitting in the dark, calculating the sum total of their exploitation. They didn't know that easy was just a setting, and settings could be changed. I was done being the person who was allowed to breathe only as long as I provided the oxygen for everyone else. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I poured a glass of cold water, sat at my dining table, and opened my laptop. The blue light of the screen was the only illumination in the room. I felt less like a daughter and more like a forensic accountant preparing for a hostile takeover. I created a new spreadsheet. I named the file simply The Ledger. I logged into my bank accounts, my credit card portals, and my Venmo history, I went back 6 years. That was the statute of limitations on most financial crimes. And while what my family did was not technically illegal, it was certainly a crime against my future. I started typing. Date, merchant, amount, stated reason, actual outcome. Row 1, March, 2018, $350. Reason, mom's car battery died. Outcome, never repaid. Row 12, July, 2018, $800. Reason, Lila's rent was short because she was between opportunities. Outcome, Lila bought a designer handbag 2 weeks later. The rhythmic clacking of the keyboard became a hypnotic soundtrack. I worked through 2019, then 2020. The numbers began to blur, but the pattern remained terrifiedly clear. The amounts were escalating. It started with utilities and groceries, small 3-figure sums that were easy to overlook. But by 2021, the asks had evolved into investments in their lifestyle. $1,200 for a networking trip for my father, $2,000 for a medical procedure for the family dog that I later found out cost $400. I stopped breathing when I reached row 214. It was from 2 years ago. The entry was for $5,000. I remembered the day clearly. My father had called me in a panic. He was trying to secure a spot in a private real estate investment group, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that required a good faith deposit to prove liquidity. He had told me his funds were tied up in a pending transfer and that he just needed my name and my check to hold the seat for 48 hours. He swore on his life that the check would never be cashed, or if it was, he would wire the money back immediately. I looked at the bank statement on my screen. The check had been cashed. The wire never came. When I had asked him about it a week later, he had used a technique I now recognized as gaslighting. He told me the investment had rolled over into a high-yield account and that pulling it out now would ruin the compound interest. He made me feel stupid for asking, as if I didn't understand high finance. But as I dug deeper into the digital paper trail that night, I found something worse than the lost $5,000. I found a document in my email archives, a DocuSign envelope I had signed in a rush during a work meeting because my mother had texted me 20 times saying it was urgent paperwork for the deposit. I opened the PDF. It wasn't just a deposit receipt, it was a guarantor agreement. I read the fine print, my stomach turning into a knot of cold dread. By signing that document, I hadn't just given them $5,000. I had made myself legally liable for any capital calls or dues associated with my father's membership in this investment club. If he defaulted on his quarterly buy-ins, the club could come after me. I checked the club's status online. My father was 3/4 behind on his dues. The outstanding balance was $12,000. They weren't just taking my cash. They were leveraging my credit score, my name, and my legal standing to underwrite a fantasy life they could not afford. I was not just a safety net. I was the insurance policy they planned to burn if the house caught fire. Megan? I jumped. Ethan was standing in the doorway of the bedroom, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked at me, then at the laptop, then at the stack of printed bank statements I had started to organize on the table. He walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. He didn't look at the screen. He looked at my face. "How bad is it?" he asked. "It is over $40,000 in 6 years," I whispered. "And there is a liability clause on a contract I didn't read properly that could cost me another 12." Ethan pulled a chair out and sat opposite me. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. "Okay," he said. He didn't look surprised. "Now you have the data. The data removes the emotion. It is just math now." "I should call them," I said, my voice rising with a sudden surge of adrenaline. "I should drive over there right now and throw this laptop on their dining table. I should scream until they understand what they have done." Ethan shook his head slowly. "And what will that achieve?" "It will let them know I know." "Megan," Ethan said, his voice calm, cutting through my panic like a scalpel. "If you scream, they will cry. If you show them the spreadsheet, they will call you obsessive. They will say you are keeping score. They will turn this around and make you the villain who cares more about money than family. They will drain your energy just like they drained your bank account. He leaned forward. So I am asking you one question. Do you want to have a conversation, or do you want to end the system? I looked at the spreadsheet. I looked at the guarantor agreement. I thought about the dinner at the Monarch. I thought about the rehearsed smiles. A conversation implies two parties listening. My parents did not listen. They reloaded. If I confronted them, they would just find a new way to hide the expenses, or they would guilt me into forgiving the debt. I want to end it, I said. I want to unplug the machine. Then you do not say a word, Ethan said. You do not negotiate with terrorists, and you do not negotiate with emotional vampires. You just change the locks. The next morning, I took a half-day off from Northbridge Systems. I did not go to see my parents. I went to a high-rise building downtown to meet with Marianne Graves. Marianne was a financial attorney recommended by a colleague. She was a woman made of sharp angles and sharper suits. Her office smelled of espresso and expensive leather. She listened to my story without interrupting, her face a mask of professional detachment. When I showed her the guarantor agreement, she adjusted her glasses. "This is sloppy," she said, tapping the paper, "but it is binding. However, there is an exit clause. You can resign the membership as the guarantor if you pay the current outstanding balance and file a notarized notice of withdrawal 30 days in advance." "So I have to pay the $12,000? I asked, feeling sick. "You have to pay it to stop the bleeding," Marianne said. "Think of it as a severance package. If you don't pay it, and they default further, you could be on the hook for legal fees and interest. It could ruin your credit for a decade. My advice? Pay it. Close the loop, and send a cease and desist letter regarding the use of your identity for any future financial instruments." She looked me in the eye. "Megan, you are looking for a legal way to make them stop asking. There isn't one. You can't sue someone for asking you for money, but you can protect yourself from the consequences of saying yes." "I am not going to say yes anymore," I said. "Good," Marianne said. "But be warned. When you change the terms of engagement, people like this do not go quietly. They escalate. The moment you cut the supply, they will attack the supplier. You need to be ready for the backlash." "I am ready," I said. "Are you?" Marianne asked. "Because the most effective boundary is the one you do not explain. You do not justify it. You just enforce it. Can you sit through a dinner and watch the bill arrive and simply do nothing?" I thought about that. Could I? The conditioning ran deep. The urge to fix things was a physical reflex. "I need to be sure," I said. "I need one last test." "A test?" "I need to see it one more time," I told her. "I need to see the mechanism work when I'm looking for it. I need to be absolutely certain that there is no affection there, only transaction. If I am going to cut them off, I cannot have a single doubt left in my mind." Marianne nodded slowly. "Dangerous, but if you need the closure, go ahead. Just leave your checkbook at home." 2 days later, the text came. It was from Lila this time. "Hey, Grant got a promotion. Finally, LOL. We are thinking of going to the Onyx Room on Friday to celebrate. Mom and Dad are dying to go. 7 o'clock? The Onyx Room. It was even more expensive than the Monarch. It was a place where steaks cost $80 without sides. I stared at the phone. It was the perfect setup. A celebration for someone else, at a price point none of them could afford, with a time slot that implied I was an add-on. I typed my reply. "Sounds great. See you there." I did not ask if I could bring anything. I did not ask who was paying. I agreed to the trap. I closed my laptop. The spreadsheet was saved. The lawyer was retained. The $12,000 for the investment club was queued to be paid from my savings account, a painful final amputation of their financial hold on me. Now, all that was left was the performance. I would go to dinner, I would eat, and I would wait for the moment the bill arrived. I needed to see their faces when the safety net didn't deploy. I needed that image to fuel me for the war that was coming. I walked into the living room where Ethan was reading. "I accepted the invite," I said. He looked up, his expression serious. You know what is going to happen." "Yes," I said. "They are going to order the most expensive wine. They are going to laugh, and then they are going to hand me the bill." "And you?" Ethan asked. "I am going to let it sit on the table until it rots." Friday arrived with the inevitability of a court summons. The text from my mother came at 3 in the afternoon, 4 hours before the dinner that Lila had supposedly organized. "Table is set for 7. Don't be late this time. We are already excited about the wine list." There was no question mark. There was no inquiry into my schedule. There was only the command and the subtle, passive-aggressive reminder of my previous tardiness. It was a masterclass in behavioral conditioning. By reminding me that I was late last time, she was preemptively putting me in debt before I even opened my wallet. She was banking on my guilt to ensure I arrived with my credit card unlocked and ready to fire. I dressed carefully for the occasion. In the past, I would have worn something modest, something that didn't scream money, trying to blend into the background so as not to provoke their envy. Tonight, I wore a tailored black blazer and the sharpest heels I owned. I wasn't dressing for a family dinner. I was dressing for a board meeting where I intended to fire the entire executive team. When I arrived at the Onyx room, the air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic and old money. The lighting was low, designed to flatter aging faces and hide the exorbitant prices on the menu. I spotted them immediately. They had secured a round table in the center of the room, the kind of spot you reserve when you want to be seen, not when you want to talk. My father was already holding a glass of amber liquid that I knew cost $40 a pour. My mother was laughing, her head thrown back, a performance of joy that felt too loud for the room. Lila was there, looking radiant and expensive, and next to her sat the new addition to our cast, Grant. Grant was handsome in a way that suggested high maintenance. He wore a suit that was slightly too shiny and a watch that was too big for his wrist. As I approached, I saw his eyes darting around the table, assessing the wine bottle, the appetizers, and the waiter. He had the restless energy of a man who enjoys the high life but is perpetually worried about who is signing the receipt. "There she is," my father announced, booming loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "The working girl returns." "Hi, Dad," I said, sliding into the empty chair they had left for me. It was positioned directly across from the wine bucket, naturally. "Megan, this is Grant," Lila said, resting a possessive hand on his forearm. "Grant, this is my sister. She works in computers or something." "Operations," I corrected, extending a hand. "Nice to meet you, Grant." Grant's handshake was firm, but his eyes lingered on my blazer. Then my bag. He was calculating. I recognized the look, because I had seen it in the mirror of my own family for 3 decades. He was trying to figure out where I fit in the food chain. Was I a competitor? Or was I the prey? "Lila tells me you are quite the career woman," Grant said, his smile slick. "Must be nice. Lila is more of a free spirit." "She certainly is," I said, picking up the menu. "We already ordered appetizers," my mother interjected, waving her hand. "The seafood tower, and the Wagyu sliders, and another bottle of the Pinot, the reserve, obviously." I looked at the menu. The seafood tower was $180. The reserve Pinot was $200. They hadn't even waited for me to sit down before racking up a bill that equaled a car payment. "Sounds delicious," I said, keeping my voice even. The dinner proceeded with the familiar, grotesque choreography I had come to loathe. They ordered without looking at the right side of the menu. My father ordered the surf and turf, market price. Lila ordered the truffle risotto, barely touched it, and then complained it was too earthy. Grant, emboldened by the family's apparent lack of budget consciousness, ordered a scotch that was older than I was. I ordered a side salad and a glass of water. "Is that all you are having?" my mother asked, frowning. "You make us look bad, Megan. Live a little." "I had a late lunch," I lied. "I am just here for the company." My mother's eyes narrowed slightly, detecting a shift in the frequency, but she quickly covered it with a sip of wine. She leaned in, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she wanted something. "Speaking of company," she began, twirling the stem of her glass. "Your father and I were looking at the sunroom this morning. The windows are just drafty. Terrible insulation. We were thinking, before winter hits, we really need to get those replaced. For the house value, you know?" She paused, waiting for me to jump in. This was the part where I was supposed to say, "Oh, Mom, don't worry. Send me the quote." This was the part where I secured my place as the good daughter. I took a sip of my water. "That sounds like a smart maintenance project. You should definitely get some bids." The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds, but it felt like an hour. My mother blinked. My father cleared his throat. "Well, yes," my father said, blustering slightly. "We have a guy. It is just a matter of cash flow timing. You know how it is." "I do," I said, smiling pleasantly at Grant. "Cash flow is tricky for everyone these days. So, Grant, what do you do?" I watched my mother recoil physically, as if I had slapped her. I had ignored the cue. I had missed my line. The tension at the table ratcheted up a notch. Lila looked from me to Mom, confused. The script was breaking, but they weren't sure why. For the next hour, I sat there and recorded everything. I watched Grant ply my father with compliments about a business acumen my father didn't possess. I watched Lila kick Grant under the table when he mentioned he was between consulting gigs. I watched my parents bask in the glow of a luxury they hadn't earned, confident that the bill was a problem for future Megan. But future Megan was not here. Only present Megan was here, and she was done. Then came the moment. The waiter cleared the dessert plates. The table was a graveyard of excess. Half-eaten creme brulee, the dregs of the third bottle of wine, espresso cups. The waiter returned with the black leather folder. He placed it in the center of the table, equidistant from everyone, but we all knew the physics of this universe. The folder had a gravitational pull, and I was the black hole. My father suddenly found a spot on the tablecloth that required intense scrubbing with his thumb. My mother began rummaging in her purse for a lipstick that I knew she didn't need. Lila and Grant became engrossed in a conversation about a music festival. The silence stretched. It was heavy, suffocating, and perfect. Usually, I would count to 5 and then reach for it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I did not move. 6, 7, 8. My mother's eyes darted to the folder, then to me. She offered a small, tight laugh. "Well," she said, "that was lovely." She looked at the folder again. The prompt was obvious. "Pick it up, Megan." I smiled. It was, wasn't it? I pushed my chair back and stood up. The relief on their faces was instantaneous. They thought I was getting up to retrieve my wallet from my blazer, or perhaps to carry the folder to the cashier station to save them the awkwardness of watching me sign. "I will be right back," I said. "I just need to have a quick word with the manager about the bill." "Oh, sure, honey," my father said, exhaling a breath he had been holding. "Take your time. No rush." Grant smirked, probably thinking I was going to try to expense it to my company. "Smart move," he muttered. I walked calmly through the restaurant. I did not go to the restroom. I walked straight to the maitre d' station near the entrance. The manager, a man with impeccable posture, looked up. "How can I help you, miss?" "Table 14, I said clearly. "The party of 5 in the center." "Yes?" "I just wanted to confirm something. There are no corporate accounts, gift cards, or pre-authorized payment methods linked to that table, correct?" The manager typed something into his terminal. "No, miss. The bill is outstanding. $740.50. "Excellent," I said. "I just wanted to make sure there was no confusion." "Would you like to settle it now?" he asked, reaching for the card reader. "No," I said. "I would not." I turned on my heel and walked back to the table. When I returned, the atmosphere was light. They were putting on their coats. My mother was already checking her phone, planning her next move. They assumed the deed was done. They assumed I had handled it at the front desk. I sat down. I folded my hands on the table. The black leather folder was still sitting exactly where the waiter had left it. My mother looked at me, then at the folder. Her brow furrowed. "Did you take care of it up front?" she asked, her voice faltering slightly. "No," I said. Lila laughed nervously. "What do you mean? You said you talked to the manager." "I did," I said. My voice was calm, conversational, deadly. I asked him if there was any prearrangement for payment. He confirmed there wasn't. "Okay," my father said, his smile looking like it was made of wax. "So?" I looked at my father, I looked at my mother, I looked at Lila, and finally at Grant, who was suddenly looking very interested in the exit sign. "So," I said, "I am not paying tonight." The silence that followed was different from the silence before. That was the silence of expectation. This was the silence of a car crash. "Excuse me?" my mother whispered. "I only had a side salad and water," I said, pointing to my empty spot. "I am happy to put down $20 for my share, including a very generous tip, but I am not paying for the seafood tower. I am not paying for the 3 bottles of wine. I am not paying for the steak." "Megan," my father hissed, his face turning a blotchy red, "don't be ridiculous. This is a restaurant. People are watching." "I know," I said, "and they are about to watch a family of 4 figure out how to split a $700 check." "We don't have our cards," my mother snapped, the mask dropping completely. "You know we didn't bring them. We assumed, You assumed I would pay." I finished for her. "Just like you assumed I would pay for the deposit. Just like you assumed I would pay for the car repairs. But assumptions are dangerous things, Mom." Lila looked panicked. "Megan, stop it. You are embarrassing us in front of Grant." "Grant seems like a smart guy," I said, looking at him. "Grant, did you assume I was buying you dinner tonight?" Grant stammered, his face pale. I just thought—" "I am stopping the system," I said, keeping my voice low but hard as iron. "I am not the bank. I am not the backup plan. And I am certainly not the fool who pays $700 to be treated like an accessory to your lifestyle." I reached into my purse, pulled out a $20 bill, and placed it on top of the leather folder. "That covers my salad," I said. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My heart was pounding. Not with fear, but with the exhilarating rush of finally letting go of a heavy weight. "The rest," I said, looking down at my stunned, paralyzed family, "is up to you." The transformation on my mother's face was instantaneous. The soft, indulgent smile she had worn for the benefit of the room vanished, replaced by a rigid mask of fury that I had not seen since I was a teenager. It was not just anger. It was the terrified aggression of a conductor whose orchestra had suddenly stopped playing in the middle of a symphony. "Sit down," she said. Her voice was no longer a request. It was a low, sharp command, pitched perfectly to be heard by me but not by the couple dining at the adjacent table. "Sit down immediately. Megan, you are making a scene." "I am not making a scene," I replied, standing my ground. "I am making a payment. My portion is covered." "This is not a negotiation," she hissed, her fingers gripping the edge of the linen tablecloth so tightly her knuckles turned white. "We are a family. We do not itemize checks like college roommates. You pick up the folder, you hand them your card, and we discuss the rest in the car. That is how this works." "That is how it worked," I corrected her. Past tense. My father cleared his throat. A deep, rumbling sound meant to assert authority. He leaned forward, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me, a tactic that had worked when I was 12 but felt pathetic now that I was 33 and financially independent. "Megan," he said, his voice dripping with a thick, artificial disappointment, "I do not know what has gotten into you lately, but this behavior is beneath you. After everything we have done, after the life we gave you, you are going to quibble over a dinner bill on our anniversary? It is insulting. It is ungrateful." "Ungrateful." I repeated the word. It hung in the air between us. "You ordered a $200 bottle of wine without asking if I wanted a glass. You ordered the seafood tower before I arrived. That is not sharing a life. Dad, That is theft with better lighting. It is family, he snapped, his volume rising dangerously close to a shout. Family supports each other. We do not keep score. You do keep score, I said calmly. You just make sure the score is always 0 for you and negative for me. Lila, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, suddenly let out a laugh. It was a brittle, cruel sound. She turned to Grant, rolling her eyes as if to say, "Can you believe this?" "Oh my God. Megan," Lila said, shaking her head, "you are being so incredibly cheap. It is actually painful to watch. You make, what, 6 figures at that boring corporate job? And you are standing here shaking over a few $100s? It is pathetic, Grant. Tell her she is being pathetic." She was trying to triangulate, trying to bring the outsider in to shame me back into submission. It was a classic mean girl tactic, but she had miscalculated the audience. I looked at Lila. Then I looked at Grant. "It is not about the amount, Lila," I said. "It is about the assumption. And since you brought up my income, perhaps we should talk about yours, or rather, the lack thereof. If $700 is so insignificant, surely you can cover it. You are the one who ordered the truffle risotto you didn't eat." Lila's face flushed a deep crimson. "I am in transition. You know that." "Then perhaps you should transition into ordering from the value menu," I said. Grant shifted in his seat. The smirk he had worn earlier was gone. He looked at the table, where the black leather folder still sat untouched, radiating a toxic energy. He looked at my parents, who were now glaring at me with open hostility, and then he looked at the bill again. He was doing the math. He realized that if I walked away, there were 3 people at the table who could not pay, and one person, him, who might be asked to step in to save the evening. He tapped his pocket. I think my phone is buzzing," Grant said. The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. "I have been waiting for a call from my agent. I really need to take this. It might be the gig in Los Angeles." "Grant, sit down," Lila said, panic edging into her voice. "Don't go right now." "I will be right back," Grant said, already pushing his chair out. He didn't look at Lila. He didn't look at me. He stood up and walked briskly toward the front door. Not the restrooms. He was not coming back. We all knew it. Lila watched him go, her mouth slightly open. The realization that her power couple act had just crumbled over a dinner check hit her hard. At that moment, the manager returned to the table. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression polite but expectant. He saw the $20 bill on the folder. He saw the tension. He saw the empty chair where Grant had been. "Is everything in order?" the manager asked. My mother looked up at him. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in her eyes, not the fear of poverty, but the fear of exposure. She was terrified that this man, a stranger in a suit, would realize that the Hartleys were frauds, that the diamonds were old, the confidence was fake, and the credit cards were maxed out. "We need a moment," my mother said, her voice tight. "Actually," I interrupted, "we do not need a moment. I am leaving, as I mentioned at the desk. That 20 covers my consumption. The rest of the party is still enjoying their evening." I looked at the manager. "Please ensure that the remaining balance is handled by the gentlemen and ladies remaining at the table. I am not authorizing any charges to my name." "Understood, Miss," the manager said. He turned his gaze to my father. "Sir, would you like to settle the remainder now?" My father looked at the folder as if it contained a bomb. He patted his jacket pockets, a pantomime of searching for a wallet he knew was empty or declined. "I seem to have left my wallet in the car," my father mumbled. It was the oldest lie in the book. "I can wait while you retrieve it," the manager said, not moving an inch. His tone made it clear. Nobody leaves this table until payment is secured. My mother turned to me one last time. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, clawing pleading. She realized the social wall was coming down. "Megan," she whispered, and her voice broke. "Please, just this once. We will pay you back on Monday. I swear. Don't do this to us here. Not in front of the staff. Not on our anniversary. I looked at her. I saw the woman who had guilted me into signing a guarantor agreement. I saw the woman who had let me sleep on a pull-out couch while she enjoyed an ocean view. I saw the woman who had taught me that love was a transaction where I provided the currency. You have been saying just this once for 6 years, I said. Megan, Lila shrieked, no longer caring about the volume. You are ruining everything. No, I said. I am just refusing to pay for the ruins. I turned away from the table. It was the hardest physical movement I had ever made. Every instinct in my body, programmed by decades of manipulation, screamed at me to turn back, to fix it, to pull out the card and make the uncomfortable feelings go away, to buy the peace. But I forced one foot in front of the other. Megan! My mother's voice rose, shrill and panicked. Megan, you get back here. You walk out that door and you are done. Do you hear me? Megan! I heard her. I heard the desperation. I heard the rage. I heard the sound of a parasite realizing the host had detached itself. I walked past the maitre d' stand. I walked past the valet desk. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the cool night air. I did not look back. I did not check to see if my father was arguing with the manager. I did not check to see if Lila was crying. I did not check to see if Grant was hailing a cab down the street. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like exhaust and city rain. But to me, it smelled like oxygen. I am done, I said to the empty sidewalk. And for the first time, I believed it. The system was broken. I had pulled the plug, and whatever darkness fell on that table inside the Onyx room was no longer my darkness to carry. The silence inside my car lasted exactly 4 minutes. That was the time it took for me to navigate from the valet stand to the first major intersection. Then, the digital assault began. My phone, mounted on the dashboard, lit up. It did not just buzz, it convulsed. A stream of notifications cascaded down the lock screen, turning the dark interior of the sedan into a strobe light of white text bubbles. I did not look at them while driving. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2, forcing my breathing to remain steady. I was a pilot flying through a storm, and I knew that if I looked at the radar, I would crash. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the phone was hot to the touch. I sat in the idling car and unlocked the screen. 37 missed calls, 14 text messages, 5 notifications from Instagram, 2 voicemails. The first few messages from my mother were time-stamped 5 minutes after I had walked out. They started with a frantic, almost pitiful tone. Megan, please come back. Dad is talking to the manager. We can fix this. Honey, this is not funny. Please turn the car around. We are embarrassed. Please. Then, at the 15-minute mark, presumably when the manager made it clear that they would not be leaving without payment, the tone shifted violently. The honey and please evaporated, replaced by the raw, unfiltered venom of a narcissist denied their supply. How dare you walk away from your family? You have humiliated us. The staff is looking at us like we are criminals. Is this what you wanted? To make your father beg? You have changed. Megan, you have become cold and cruel. I do not know who is whispering in your ear, but this is not the daughter I raised. You are ungrateful. After everything we sacrificed for you, you leave us stranded over a bill? You are selfish. I read them all. I did not feel the sting of tears. I felt the cold detachment of a coroner examining a cause of death. Selfish. That was their favorite word. In the Hartley Dictionary, selfish was defined as anyone who does not give us what we want when we want it. I walked inside the house. Ethan was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, a glass of wine in his hand. He looked at me, and he didn't need to ask how it went. My face said everything. Your dad called me, Ethan said calmly. I froze, my keys dangling from my hand. When? About 20 minutes ago, Ethan said. He sounded frantic. He tried to do the whole man-to-man thing. He said you were having some kind of episode. He said you were hysterical, and that I needed to talk some sense into you and get you to transfer the funds to his account immediately so they could leave the restaurant. I felt a surge of nausea. They were trying to bypass me. They were trying to use the patriarchy of man-to-man logic to override my agency. "What did you say?" I asked. Ethan took a sip of wine. "I told him that you are the most rational person I know. I told him that if you decided not to pay, you had a very good reason. And I told him that I respect your financial autonomy completely." And then? And then he started yelling about how I was ruining the family dynamic, so I hung up and blocked his number for the night. I exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for basic respect," Ethan said. "But you should check social media. Your sister is busy." I pulled up Instagram. Lila had not texted me directly. Lila was a coward who preferred the court of public opinion. She had posted a story, a black screen with small, white text, accompanied by a sad violin track. "It is crazy how money changes people. You think you know your own blood, but then they leave you stranded when you need them most. Ungrateful people are the worst kind of people. Family is supposed to be forever, not just when it is convenient." She hadn't tagged me, but she didn't need to. Our extended family knew exactly who she was talking about. The flying monkeys had already been deployed. A message from Aunt Sarah popped up. "Megan, is everything okay? Lila is posting some worrying things. Did something happen at dinner?" Then Cousin Mike. "Hey, heard there was some drama at the anniversary dinner. You know how your dad gets with his blood pressure. Maybe just apologize and smooth it over." They wanted me to fix it. That was the role I had played for 30 years. The fixer, the peacekeeper, the buffer. They wanted me to absorb the toxicity so they wouldn't have to deal with the fallout. I typed a reply to Aunt Sarah. I kept it surgical. "I am fine. I simply refused to pay for a $700 dinner I did not order. I am no longer paying their bills." I copied and pasted the same message to Cousin Mike. Then I muted both conversations. I was not going to litigate my emancipation in a group chat. I went to the kitchen island and plugged my phone into the charger, intending to leave it alone for the night, but then it buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. I hesitated. I expected it to be another relative, or perhaps my father using a burner phone. I opened the message. "Hey Megan, it is Grant. Lila gave me your number a while back in case of emergencies. Look, I just wanted to say I am sorry about tonight." I stared at the screen. Grant, the guy who had fled the scene. A second message appeared, 3 dots dancing briefly before the text loaded. I honestly had no idea. Lila told me before we got there that it was your treat. She literally said, "Order whatever you want. Megan loves to show off. She always pays." She told me the plan was to order the expensive stuff before you got there, so you wouldn't feel awkward about the price. She said, "Just let her arrive late. She never checks the receipt." My hand shook, not from fear, but from the sheer, vindictive clarity of it. Just let her arrive late. It wasn't a habit. It wasn't poor time management. It was a strategy. It was a premeditated tactical maneuver designed to bypass my critical thinking. They knew if I arrived early, I would see the menu prices. They knew if I arrived early, I might object to the 3rd bottle of wine, so they engineered my lateness. They manipulated the time, the setting, and the guest list to maximize the extraction of resources. Grant continued, "I feel like a jerk for ordering that scotch. I ended up splitting the bill with your dad. He had to call 3 different credit card companies to get a charge approved. It was intense. Anyway, I just wanted you to know I am done with Lila. I do not do drama, and I definitely do not do grifters. Sorry again." "Ethan," I said, my voice quiet. "Look at this." I showed him the screen. Ethan read Grant's confession. His jaw tightened. "That is it," Ethan said. "That is the smoking gun. It proves intent." "They planned it," I whispered. "They actually sat down and planned how to steal from me." "Screenshot it," Ethan commanded. "Now, before he regrets sending it or Lila makes him delete it, save it to the drive." I took the screenshot. I saved it to the folder named The Ledger. This was no longer just about money. This was about character assassination and fraud. I wasn't just collecting receipts. I was building a defense case. My phone buzzed one more time. It was my mother again. The tone had shifted once more. The anger was gone. The pleading was gone. Now, it was something far more dangerous. A threat. You think you are so smart, walking out like that? But you are forgetting something. Megan, you are forgetting whose name is on the guarantee for your father's investment club. I felt the blood drain from my face. She continued, Dad is very upset. He's thinking about resigning from the club because of the stress you caused tonight. But if he resigns, or if he stops paying the dues because he is so distraught, the club calls the guarantor immediately. That is you, remember? $12,000. Megan, plus legal fees. If we go down, you are coming with us. Do not think you can just walk away. You are tied to this family whether you like it or not. I stared at the words. It was blackmail, pure and simple. She was weaponizing the very document I had discovered 2 nights ago. She was threatening to intentionally default on a debt just to punish me for not paying for dinner. She was willing to ruin my credit score, and by extension, her own husband's reputation, just to prove that she still held the leash. What is it? Ethan asked, seeing my expression. I read him the text. She is bluffing, Ethan said, though he didn't sound entirely sure. If they default, they lose the membership. Your dad's ego won't allow that. You don't understand, I said, looking at the glowing screen. To them, the ego isn't about the membership anymore. The ego is about control. If they can't control me with guilt, they will control me with debt. They would rather burn the house down with me inside it than watch me walk out the front door. I didn't reply to her. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I opened my email and composed a message to Marianne Graves, my attorney. Subject: Urgent. Escalation and threat of default. Marianne. I need to expedite the withdrawal from the guarantor agreement we discussed. My mother has just threatened to intentionally trigger the default clause to harm my financial standing. I have the threat in writing via text message. I am attaching the screenshots. Please tell me we can file the exit paperwork tomorrow morning. I hit send. The house was quiet, but outside, the digital storm was still raging. My sister was spinning a narrative of victimhood to anyone who would listen. My father was likely drinking the rest of the expensive wine at home, raging about my betrayal, and my mother was sitting there, phone in hand, waiting for me to break. She expected me to call back in a panic. She expected me to say, Okay, I will pay the dinner. Just don't default on the club. But she had made a critical error. She thought she was threatening a daughter who was afraid of losing her family's approval. She didn't realize she was threatening a woman who had already accepted that the family was gone. I turned off my phone. I placed it face down on the counter. Let them come, I said to Ethan. I have the receipts. The morning sun that filtered into Marianne Graves's office was sharp and unforgiving, much like the lawyer herself. I sat in the leather chair, clutching a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. My laptop was open, connected to a secure server, and Marianne was projecting documents onto the large screen on the wall. The threat from my mother the previous night, that they would intentionally default on the investment club dues to ruin me, had been the catalyst. But as Marianne began to peel back the layers of the guarantor agreement I had signed 2 years ago, we discovered that the investment club was not an isolated island. It was part of an archipelago of financial entanglement that I had walked into blindfolded. Look at this clause here, Marianne said, using a laser pointer to circle a dense paragraph of legalese in the club's bylaws. Article 4, Section C, the guarantor assumes liability not only for the membership dues, but for any capital calls issued by the governing board in the event of liquidity crises. Capital calls? I asked, the term sounding foreign and dangerous. It means if the real estate market tanks and the club needs cash to save a property, they tax the members, Marianne explained, her voice devoid of pity. If the member cannot pay, they bill the guarantor. Megan, your father did not just sign you up to cover his monthly subscription. He signed you up as his underwriter." I felt a cold sweat prickle on my hairline. "But they told me it was just a deposit. They said it was a formality to hold the seat." "They lied," Marianne said simply. "Or they omitted the truth. In the eyes of the law, the signature is yours, but that is not the worst part." She clicked to the next slide. It was a document I had never seen before. It looked like a credit application for a line of credit attached to a business entity called Hartley Lifestyle Group, LLC. "Do you know what this entity is?" Marianne asked. "No," I said. "My dad has had a dozen consulting firms over the years. I lose track." "Well," Marianne said, "this LLC was formed 18 months ago. The primary principal is your father. The secondary principal is you." I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. "That is impossible. I never signed formation papers for an LLC. Technically, you did not need to be present if they had a limited power of attorney, or," she paused, looking at me over her glasses, "if they used that digital signature you authorized for the investment club and applied it here. It is a gray area. Megan, it borders on identity theft. But because you have a history of paying their bills and assisting with family finances, they could argue in court that this was done with your implied consent." I paced the small room. My parents hadn't just used me as an ATM. They had used me as a mule. They had built a shell company, attached my creditworthiness to it, and likely used it to cycle debt. "I need to see the activity," I said. "I need to see what this LLC is doing." Marianne nodded. "I pulled the credit report this morning. There is a $50,000 line of credit attached to this entity. It is maxed out. Utilization is at 99%. $50,000. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. What did they spend it on? Travel, dining, luxury goods. It is listed as business expenses, but looking at the merchant codes, the Onyx room is on here, the Monarch is on here. That trip to Italy last year? It is on here. My knees gave out, and I sank back into the chair. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just spending their own money. They weren't even spending my money directly. They were spending borrowed money that was secured against my future. I was the co-signer on a $50,000 lifestyle that they were currently drinking and eating away. "I found something else," I said, my voice trembling. "Last night, after the texts, I went through my spam folder. I searched for Hartley. I found an email from a bank sent 6 months ago. I ignored it because I thought it was a phishing scam. I opened my laptop and showed her the email. It was a notice of address change for the LLC. The address had been changed from my parents' home to a P.O. box, but the notification had been CC'd to my email address because I was listed as an officer. "They moved the mail," Marianne said, reading the screen. "They routed the statements to a P.O. box, so you would never see the bills coming to the house, and since they handled the payments, or lack thereof, you were none the wiser." "Am I going to jail?" I asked. It was an irrational fear, but in that moment, I felt like a criminal. "No," Marianne said firmly. "You are not a criminal. You are a victim of familial financial abuse, but the civil liability is real. If they default on that $50,000, the bank comes for you, they can garnish your wages, they can put a lien on your condo." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. "What do I do?" I asked. "Do I call the police?" "If you call the police and report fraud, you are sending your parents to prison," Marianne said. "Is that what you want?" I thought about it. I thought about my mother's face at the restaurant. I thought about my father's blustering pride. I hated them in that moment, but the idea of seeing them in handcuffs, I wasn't there yet. "No," I said. "I just want out." "Then we do a surgical extraction," Marianne said. "We don't ask for permission. We don't negotiate. We sever the limbs." I left the office an hour later with a plan that made me feel like an assassin. I met Ethan for lunch at a small deli near my office. I showed him the documents. I expected him to be angry, but he just looked sad. "They built a cage out of your credit score," he said quietly. "I am going to tear it down," I said. Marianne drafted the letters. I am sending them today via certified mail. I am formally resigning from the LLC. Citing lack of knowledge, I am freezing the credit line. I am alerting the credit bureaus to place a fraud alert on my file, which means no new accounts can be opened without a verbal confirmation from me. And the investment club? Ethan asked. I wired the $12,000 this morning, I said, the words tasting like bile. It wiped out my emergency fund, but I paid the dues, and I included the notarized letter of resignation as guarantor. They are out. I am out. It is done. They are going to panic, Ethan warned. When the card gets declined at the grocery store, or when the bank calls to say the line of credit is frozen, they are going to come for you. Let them, I said. The reaction was faster than I expected. It started at 4 in the afternoon. I was at my desk at Northbridge Systems, trying to focus on a supply chain report, when my office line rang. Not my cell phone, my work phone. I picked it up. Megan Hartley. What did you do? It was my father. His voice was unrecognizable, a guttural, shaking growl. I am at work, Dad, I said coldly. Do not call me on this line. The card was declined, he shouted. I am at the supplier for the new windows. The business card was declined. The bank says the account is frozen due to a security flag initiated by the secondary principal. That is you. Unlock it, now. I cannot unlock it, I said. I resigned from the LLC this morning. I also flagged the account for investigation regarding unauthorized usage. It is out of my hands. Unauthorized usage? He laughed, a high, hysterical sound. It is family money. We use it to live. You are trying to starve us? I am trying to stop you from bankrupting me, I said. I saw the statements. Dad, $50,000? The Onyx Room? The trips? That is not business. That is embezzlement. Don't you use those words with me, he screamed. I built you. I made you who you are. You made me a co-signer without my consent, I said, and now I am unmaking myself. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to type an email to the receptionist asking her to block any external calls from my parents' numbers. By the time I got home, the strategy had shifted, the anger had failed, so they moved to the next phase, the victim. I walked into my living room to find Ethan sitting on the couch, looking grim. Your mom is here, he said. I froze. What? She is in the driveway. She has been sitting in her car for an hour. I told her she couldn't come in, but she refuses to leave. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. My mother's car was parked haphazardly at the end of the driveway. She wasn't raging. She was slumped over the steering wheel, her shoulders shaking. My phone buzzed. A text from her. Please, Megan, we need to talk. It is not just the credit line. We are in trouble. Real trouble. I looked at Ethan. I have to go out there. I will come with you, he said. No, I said. I need to do this, but keep the door unlocked. I walked out of the house. The evening air was cool. I approached the car slowly, keeping a distance, like one approaches a wounded animal that might still bite. My mother rolled down the window. Her face was a mess of running mascara and red blotches. She looked 10 years older than she had at the restaurant. We are going to lose the house, she sobbed. It was the ultimate trump card, the childhood home, the symbol of our family stability. What are you talking about? I asked, keeping my arms crossed. The line of credit, she gasped, wiping her nose with a tissue. We weren't just using it for dinner, we were using it to pay the mortgage. Dad's business. It hasn't made a profit in 2 years. That LLC was the only thing keeping the bank away. If you freeze it, the checks bounce. They will foreclose. She looked at me with wide, wet eyes. Megan, please. I know we made mistakes. I know we should have asked. But you can't let us lose the house. You have to unfreeze it. Just for a month. Just until Dad closes this big deal. I stood there, feeling the weight of her manipulation pressing down on me. It was brilliant, really. They had taken a hostage, their own home, and put a gun to its head, telling me that I was the one pulling the trigger. I thought about the big deal that was always just around the corner. I thought about the $50,000 spent on appearances while the mortgage went unpaid. "Mom," I said softly. "Yes?" She leaned forward, hope igniting in her eyes. "If I unfreeze that account," I said, "you won't pay the mortgage. You will go to dinner. You will buy a new suit for Dad to look the part for the deal. And in a month, you will be back here, crying in my driveway, except the debt will be $60,000 instead of $50,000. "No, we promise," she wailed. "We learned our lesson." "You didn't learn a lesson," I said. "You just got caught." "So you are going to let us be homeless?" she spat, the sorrow instantly hardening back into malice. "You are going to throw your parents on the street?" "I am not throwing you anywhere," I said. "I am just refusing to be the life raft you poke holes in." I took a step back. "The freeze stays," I said. "The resignation stands. If you are losing the house, Mom, I suggest you sell the jewelry, or the car, or the wine collection." "You are a monster," she whispered. "No," I said, turning back toward my house, toward Ethan, toward the life I had built with my own hands. "I am just the one person you can't afford anymore." I walked back inside and locked the door. I watched through the window as she sat there for another 10 minutes, screaming silently at my windshield, before finally reversing out of the driveway. She was gone, but I knew this wasn't the end. They were cornered rats now, and cornered rats don't just run. They attack. I turned to Ethan. "We need to prepare for the dinner," I said. "What dinner?" Ethan asked. "The one where they try to put me on trial in front of the whole family," I said, "because that is the only card they have left." The invitation was framed as an olive branch. It was a text from my father, sent 24 hours after the driveway confrontation. It was short, devoid of apologies, but heavy with implication. "Sunday dinner. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike are coming. We need to clear the air. Please be there. Mom is making her roast." It was a summons to a kangaroo court. I knew exactly what this was. They were bringing in the jury, my extended family, to witness the trial of Megan the Ungrateful. They wanted to surround me with the weight of familial obligation, hoping that the presence of witnesses would shame me into opening my checkbook. I stood in front of the mirror in my hallway, smoothing down my dress. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "You do not have to go," he said. "We can order Thai food and watch a movie. You can block their numbers." "If I don't go," I said, applying a layer of lipstick that felt like war paint, "they will control the narrative. They will tell Sarah and Mike that I abandoned them. They will spin a story where I am the villain who stole their identity, rather than the victim who reclaimed it. I need to go. I need to look them in the eye and say no in front of an audience." "Do you want me to come?" "No," I said. "If you are there, they will blame you. They will say you corrupted me. This has to be me, just me." I drove to the house in silence. The driveway was full. Aunt Sarah's sedan was parked next to my father's luxury SUV, the one I now knew was leased through the shell company I had frozen. When I walked inside, the smell of pot roast and rosemary hit me. It was the scent of my childhood, a sensory trigger designed to make me feel safe, small, and compliant. They were all gathered in the living room. My mother was sitting on the floral armchair, clutching a glass of white wine. She looked pale, her eyes rimmed with red, playing the part of the martyr to perfection. My father stood by the fireplace, looking grave and misunderstood. Lila was sitting on the floor near Aunt Sarah's legs, looking up at her with wide, innocent eyes, like a child seeking protection. "She is here," Lila announced, her voice quiet. The room went silent. Aunt Sarah looked at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. Uncle Mike just nodded, looking like he would rather be anywhere else. "Megan," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly, "I am glad you came. We were just telling Sarah how worried we are about you." I walked further into the room but did not sit down. "Worried about me? That is interesting." "Well, yes," Aunt Sarah chimed in, putting a hand on Lila's shoulder. "Your mom says you have been under a lot of stress at work, that you are lashing out. Lila said you left them at a restaurant the other night, without paying. That does not sound like you. Honey. The trap was set. They had framed my boundaries as a mental health crisis. If I was stressed or unstable, then my financial decisions could be dismissed as irrational outbursts. I am perfectly fine. Aunt Sarah, I said, keeping my voice level. I did not lash out. I simply declined to pay for a $700 dinner I did not order. There is a difference. My father stepped forward, his face serious. See? This is what we mean. Everything is a transaction to her now. $700. She counts every penny while her family suffers. Dinner is ready, my mother interrupted. Sensing that the confrontation was starting too early, she wanted to get me to the table. The table was their arena. We moved to the dining room. The fine china was out, the heavy silverware. It was a display of stability, a visual lie to counter the reality of the foreclosure notices I knew were looming. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation was a masterclass in passive aggression. My mother heaped potatoes onto my plate with a shaking hand. Eat, Megan, she said softly. You look so thin. I worry that you are not taking care of yourself. You get so focused on money and work. You forget to live. I am living just fine, Mom, I said. Are you? Lila asked, picking at her food. Because you seem really angry. I was telling Grant, well, before he and I took a break, that I missed the old Megan, the one who was generous, the one who cared. Taking a break? I asked. Or did he dump you because he realized the free ride was over? Megan, Uncle Mike barked, startled by my sharpness. That is uncalled for. Is it? I looked at my uncle. Did they tell you why I stopped paying? Did they tell you about the $50,000 line of credit they opened in my name without my consent? Did they tell you they put me down as a guarantor for a private club I have never visited? The room went dead silent. Aunt Sarah lowered her fork. She looked at my mother, then at me. A line of credit? Sarah asked. Diane, what is she talking about? She is exaggerating, my father said quickly, his voice booming. It was a business arrangement, a family partnership. Megan agreed to help with the logistics. Now she is twisting it to make us look bad because she is having a tantrum. I did not agree, I said, speaking to Sarah. I found out 3 days ago, and when I froze the account to prevent further fraud, they told me I was ruining the family. My mother set her glass down hard. We did that for you, to build an asset for the future, for inheritance. You spent it on wine and vacations, I said. I saw the statements. There is no asset. There is only debt. Well, Aunt Sarah said, shifting uncomfortably in her chair. I suppose that explains the phone call. My father froze. What phone call? Sarah looked at him, confused. The one from the bank. They called the house line yesterday looking for you. But I picked up because I was over helping with the garden. I thought it was a mistake. They said something about an accelerated demand regarding the lien. I thought you guys were having a cash flow issue. That is why I asked if you needed help with the catering for the reunion next month. The color drained from my father's face. My mother looked like she was going to be sick. I looked at them, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Accelerated demand, I repeated. That means you are not just behind on the mortgage. You are in default on a bridge loan, aren't you? That is why you needed the credit line unlocked. That is why you needed me to pay for dinner. You don't have any cash. None. That is private business, my father shouted. Slamming his hand on the table, the silverware jumped. You do not discuss that here. You invited the audience, Dad, I said coldly. You wanted them to see how terrible I am. Well, now they see. You are broke. You have been broke for years. And you have been using my credit score to patch the holes in your sinking ship. We are not broke, my mother cried, tears streaming down her face. It is just a liquidity gap. We have assets. The house is leveraged to the hilt, I cut her off. And now the bank is calling. I stood up. I placed my napkin on the table. I am done, I said. And I want to make this clear in front of witnesses. I will not pay the mortgage. I will not pay the bridge loan. I will not sign a forbearance agreement. I will not transfer a single cent to your accounts. You have to, Lila screamed, standing up to match me. If we lose the house, where am I supposed to live? I cannot afford an apartment in the city. Then get a job, Lila, I said. Get to? My father stood up, his face purple with rage. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You ungrateful little brat, he spat. I raised you. I fed you. I put clothes on your back. You owe us. You owe us everything. It is not your money. It is family money. You are only successful because we gave you the foundation. You gave me anxiety, I said. You gave me a complex that made me think I had to buy love. You didn't give me a foundation. You gave me an anchor. If you walk out that door, my father roared, you are dead to us. Do not come crawling back when you are lonely. Do not expect a penny of inheritance. Inheritance? I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Dad, there is no inheritance. There is only debt, and I'm finally refusing to inherit that. I looked at Aunt Sarah. She looked horrified. She wasn't looking at me with judgment anymore. She was looking at her brother and sister-in-law with the dawning realization that she had been lied to for years. I am sorry for the scene, Sarah, I said. But you needed to know, whatever money they ask you for next, just know you won't get it back. I grabbed my purse. My mother was sobbing into her hands, a sound that used to tear my heart out but now just sounded like noise. My father was glaring at me, breathing hard, stripped of his pretenses, revealing the tyrant beneath the suit. I walked to the front door. The air in the hallway felt lighter, cleaner. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I turned back to look at them one last time. They were frozen in a tableau of ruin, my father fuming, my mother weeping, Lila pouting, and my relatives staring in shock. You know, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent house. I always wondered why you invited me last, why you always booked the table and then texted me. I used to think it was because you didn't respect my time. I looked my father in the eye. But now I know. You invited me last because you had to make sure the bill was already too high for you to pay before I got there. You needed me trapped. Well, congratulations. The trap is empty. I opened the door and walked out into the night. I heard my father shouting my name, but I didn't stop. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away from the house, from the debt, and from the people who had loved my utility more than they had ever loved me. The week following the disastrous family dinner was characterized by a distinct shift in atmosphere. It was the calm before the artillery barrage. I did not return to my parents' house. I did not answer the frantic, weeping voicemails from my mother or the belligerent text messages from my father. Instead, I spent my evenings in the conference room of Marianne Graves's law office, assembling a document that would serve as the tombstone for my role as the family savior. We called it the master file. It was not a rant. It was not a diary entry. It was a forensic accounting of 6 years of financial parasitism. Marianne and I organized the data into clear, irrefutable categories. We had a section for direct loans never repaid, totaling $42,000. We had a section for unauthorized credit usage, which detailed the $50,000 burned through the shell company. We had a timeline of coercive events, matching the dates of their urgent requests to the dates of their luxury purchases. This is strong, Marianne said. Flipping through the binder on Thursday evening, she tapped a printed screenshot of Grant's text message, the one where he admitted Lila had planned my late arrival to force me to pay. This is the nail in the coffin. It proves premeditation. It moves this from bad parenting to conspiracy to defraud. I do not want to sue them, I said, looking at the stack of papers. I do not want to drag this into public court records where everyone in Charlotte can read about how my father bought a Rolex with money he borrowed against my credit score. We do not need to go to court, Marianne corrected me. We just need to make them believe that we will. This file is your leverage. It is the wall you are going to build so high that they can never climb over it again. We drafted a formal letter, It was not emotional. It did not use the words hurt or betrayed. It was purely transactional. It stated that as of immediate effect, I was severing all financial ties. It demanded the immediate removal of my name from any and all shared accounts, leases, and insurance policies. It included a strict deadline of 7 days for them to provide proof that they had refinanced the debt solely in their names. "And if they don't?" I asked. "Then we file the fraud report," Marianne said, "and we send a copy of this file to the district attorney." I sent the letter via courier on Friday morning. The reaction was not the explosion I expected. It was an implosion. By Friday afternoon, the facade of the Hartley family began to crack in real time. Without the buffer of my credit line, the reality of their situation crashed down on them. My father went to pick up his dry cleaning, 4 suits he wore to look like a tycoon, and his card was declined. The owner of the shop, a man who had known our family for 20 years, called me. "Megan," he said, sounding embarrassed, "I hate to bother you at work, but your dad is here. He is shouting about a bank error. He told me to call you to authorize the payment on your card. He says he forgot his wallet." I closed my eyes for a second, feeling the old reflex to fix it twitch in my chest. Then I killed it. "I am sorry, Mr. Henderson," I said. "I cannot authorize any charges. My father is responsible for his own bills. If he cannot pay, please follow your standard store policy." "Oh," Mr. Henderson said. The silence on the line was heavy with understanding. "I see. Well, I will handle it." I learned later that my father had to leave the suits there. It was a small humiliation, but for a man like him, it was a mortal wound. Lila tried a different angle. She went to the relatives. She called Cousin Mike. She called Aunt Sarah. She even called my second cousin in Atlanta. She spun a story about how I was having a mental breakdown, how Ethan was controlling me, how I was vindictive and cruel. But she had underestimated the impact of the Sunday dinner. Aunt Sarah had seen the mask slip. She had heard about the bridge loan and the foreclosure threats. When Lila called Sarah to ask for a small loan to help Mom and Dad with groceries because Megan cut them off, Sarah did not open her wallet. She called me instead. She sounded desperate. "Megan," Sarah told me on the phone. "But I told her what you said. I told her that if they are in that much trouble, they need to sell the house, not borrow more money." Lila hung up on me. "Thank you, Sarah," I said. "I am sorry you are in the middle of this." "I am not in the middle," Sarah said firmly. "I am on the side of the truth, and it looks like you are the only one telling it." The isolation was working. My parents were realizing that their social credit was as overdrawn as their bank accounts. They had no one left to impress because everyone who mattered was starting to see the cracks in the plaster. Then came the surprise from the flank. Grant texted me on Saturday morning. "Hey, just wanted to let you know I broke it off with Lila." I replied, "I figured that was coming." "Yeah," Grant wrote back. "She tried to get me to co-sign a lease for an apartment downtown because she said her parents were downsizing. I did a background check on her. Her credit score is in the 400s. I told her I am not looking to adopt a dependent. She screamed at me for an hour, said I was just like you. I will take that as a compliment," I typed. "You should," Grant replied. "Look, if you need anything, let me know. I do not like being used as a prop in someone's con game." I stared at the phone. Grant was a bit flashy, a bit shallow, but he had a line. My family had crossed it, and suddenly, I realized I could use that. On Sunday evening, exactly 1 week after the disastrous anniversary dinner, the summons arrived. It was not a text. It was an email from my father, sent to my personal address. The subject line was simply, "Meeting, Megan. We received your letter from the lawyer. We understand that you are serious. We cannot refinance the debts in 7 days. It is impossible. We will lose everything. We are asking for one final meeting, not to ask for money, but to discuss a structured exit plan. We want to do this amicably. We want to protect the family name. Meet us at the Monarch tomorrow at 7. We have booked a private room so we can talk freely." I read the email twice. The Monarch, the scene of the first crime. They were trying to pull me back into their territory. They chose a high-end restaurant again, likely thinking that the setting would intimidate me, or perhaps hoping that the nostalgia of family dinners would soften my resolve. They wanted a structured exit plan, which was code for negotiate a way for you to keep paying a little bit longer. Ethan looked at the email over my shoulder. "It is a trap," he said. "They want to get you in a private room and gang up on you. They will cry. They will threaten. They will beg." "I know," I said. "But if I don't go, they will say I refuse to negotiate. They will tell the bank and the court that I was uncooperative. I need to close this loop personally." "You are not going alone," Ethan said. "No," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "I am not, but I am not bringing you." "Who then?" "I am bringing the truth," I said, "and I am bringing the witnesses they created." I picked up my phone. I dialed Marianne first. "Are you free for dinner tomorrow?" I asked. "I am paying. It is a working dinner." "I can be available," Marianne said, her tone professional. "Do you want me to bring the settlement papers?" "Bring everything," I said. "Bring the fraud report draft. Bring the cease and desist orders. I want them to see exactly what the alternative to signing looks like." Then I dialed a second number. I wasn't sure he would agree, but I had a feeling his pride was just as bruised as my bank account. "Hello?" Grant answered. "Grant, it is Megan," I said. "I have a strange proposition for you. How would you like to enjoy a very expensive steak dinner at my expense, in exchange for answering one simple question in front of my parents?" There was a pause on the line. Then Grant chuckled. "If it involves watching Lila squirm after she tried to stick me with a leash, I am in." I spent the rest of Sunday night preparing. I printed 3 copies of the master file. I bound them in black covers. They looked like indictments. I felt a strange sense of calm. For years, I had walked into restaurants with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering how much the bill would be, wondering if my card would clear, wondering if I had enough to cover rent for the month. Tomorrow, I would walk into the Monarch with zero anxiety. I wasn't going there to eat. I wasn't going there to be a daughter. I was going there to be an executioner of old habits. They wanted a negotiation. They wanted to discuss protecting the family name. They didn't realize that the family name was already dead. They were just trying to get me to pay for the funeral. I packed the files into my briefcase. I checked my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't easy Megan. She wasn't the girl who sat on the pull-out couch. She was a woman who had realized that the only way to win a rigged game was to flip the table. "Ready?" Ethan asked from the doorway. "No," I said. "I am overdue." I went to sleep that night and dreamed of silence. Not the silence of being silenced, but the silence of a phone that no longer rang with demands. Tomorrow, I would buy that silence, and the price would be exactly the cost of the truth. The private dining room at the Monarch was an airless chamber of mahogany and velvet. It was designed for privacy, for backroom deals and illicit affairs, making it the perfect setting for what was about to happen. My parents and Lila were already seated when I arrived. They had positioned themselves on one side of the long rectangular table, presenting a united front. I walked in. I did not sit down. "Megan," my mother said, gesturing to the empty chair opposite them. "Please, sit. Let us be civilized." "I am standing," I said. My father cleared his throat. He looked tired. The bluster from the other night was gone, replaced by a desperate, twitching anxiety. He poured himself a glass of water, his hand shaking enough that ice clinked against the glass. "We want to talk about family," my father began, his voice raspy. "We know we have pushed you. We know things have been complicated financially. But you have to understand, Megan, everything we did to maintain a standard for you girls, to give you connections, to give you a name that meant something in this city. You gave me a name that is currently flagged for fraud at 3 major banks," I said. "We sacrificed for you," my mother interjected, her voice rising in that familiar, shrill cadence. "I gave up my career to raise you. Your father worked 80 hours a week. And now, when we hit a rough patch, You turn on us? You hire lawyers? You treat us like strangers? I am not treating you like strangers, I said calmly. I treat strangers better. I usually pay strangers back. Lila sat with her arms crossed, looking at the tablecloth. Can we just skip the lecture? Dad said you have a plan. What is the plan? Are you going to help us save the house or not? I do have a plan, I said. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the black binder. I placed it in the center of the table. It landed with a heavy, dull thud that echoed in the quiet room. What is this? My father asked, eyeing it suspiciously. That, I said, is the ledger. It is a comprehensive record of every loan, every unauthorized credit card charge, every gaslighted deposit, and every manipulated dinner bill for the last 6 years. It also contains the text messages you sent me 3 days ago threatening to ruin my credit if I did not pay up. My mother recoiled as if the binder were radioactive. You kept records? You were spying on us? I was balancing the books, I corrected her. Something you have never done. This is insulting, my father spat, pushing the binder away. We are here to find a solution, not to look at your scrapbooks. The solution is in the binder, I said. Turn to the last page. They did not move. Open it, I commanded. My father flipped the binder open. He stared at the document on the last page. It was a formal separation of liability agreement, drafted by Marianne, alongside a confession of judgment regarding the unauthorized use of the shell company. You want us to sign this? My father looked up, incredulous. This admits that we defrauded you. This admits that the LLC was a sham. If this gets out, I will be ruined. No one will do business with me. You are already ruined, Dad, I said. The only difference is that right now, you are dragging me down with you. This document cuts the rope. I won't sign it, he said, slamming the binder shut. I will not put my name on a confession. Then I will file the report with the district attorney tomorrow morning, I said, and I will attach this binder as Exhibit A. You wouldn't, my mother whispered. You wouldn't send your own father to jail. You threatened to destroy my financial future to pay for a country club membership, I said. So tell me, Mom, why should I protect you? What are you so afraid of me finding out that you had to force me to pay for everything? My mother looked away. It is the investors, isn't it? I asked. My father went pale. You didn't just borrow from the bank, I said, piecing it together. You borrowed private money from people who do not use collection agencies. That is why you need cash. That is why you are terrified. My father put his head in his hands. It was a bridge loan, he mumbled. High interest, hard money lenders. They gave us 30 days. If we don't pay, they take the house, the cars, everything. We thought if you unlock the credit line, we could pay the interest and buy more time. Time to do what? I asked. To dig a deeper hole? We just needed you to be a daughter, he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. Just for once. Why couldn't you just be easy? Because being easy is expensive, I said. My father looked at me with pure hatred. You have been poisoned. It is that boyfriend of yours, Ethan. He put these ideas in your head. He turned you against us. Ethan didn't turn me, I said. He just turned on the light. I gestured toward the door. Actually, I think you should tell him that yourself. The door opened. Ethan walked in. He looked calm, solid, and unimpressed by the luxury surroundings. But he wasn't alone. Marianne Graves walked in behind him, carrying a notary seal and a briefcase. And behind her was Grant. Lila gasped. She sat up straight, her hand flying to her hair. Grant? What are you doing here? Grant didn't look at her. He looked at my parents. I am here to clarify the record, Grant said. His voice was steady. Lila told me explicitly that the plan for the anniversary dinner was to arrive early, run up the bill, and wait for Megan to arrive so she would be forced to pay. She called it the Megan tax. She said you have been doing it for years. My mother stood up. That is a lie. He is lying. I have the text messages. Mrs. Hartley, Grant said, holding up his phone. Megan has copies in the binder. It was a premeditated scheme. My father looked at Grant, then at Marianne, then at me. He realized the walls were closing in. He turned his fury on Ethan. "This is your fault," my father snarled at Ethan. "You come into my family, you manipulate my daughter, you try to steal her money." "Stop," Ethan said. He didn't shout. He didn't step forward. He just spoke with a quiet authority that silenced the room. "I did not change Megan. I did not manipulate her. I just reminded her that she has the right to say no. And unlike you, I do not need her money to feel like a man." The insult landed like a physical blow. My father slumped back in his chair. Marianne stepped forward. She placed the notary stamp on the table next to the binder. "My client has made a generous offer," Marianne said, her voice crisp and professional. "She is willing to forego pressing criminal charges for identity theft and fraud. She is willing to absorb the $12,000 she paid to the investment club as a loss. In exchange, you will sign the separation agreement. You will acknowledge that the debt on the LLC is yours and yours alone, and you will agree to a permanent cease and desist regarding any future financial requests." "And if we don't?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. "Then I walk out of this room," I said, "and tomorrow, the police walk into your house." The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. They looked at each other, my mother, my father, and Lila. They were looking for an escape hatch. They were looking for a lie that would work. They were looking for a way to guilt me, to shame me, to bully me. But there were too many witnesses. Grant knew the truth about their schemes. Marianne knew the truth about their fraud. Ethan knew the truth about their cruelty. And I finally knew the truth about my own worth. They had no money. They had no reputation left to protect. They had no leverage. My father picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. "I will never forgive you for this," he whispered as he signed the document. "I know," I said. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for a receipt." He slid the paper to my mother. She cried as she signed it. Big, theatrical tears that dripped onto the page. Lila refused to look at anyone, but she signed the witness line when Marianne pointed to it, terrified that Grant might reveal more of her secrets if she resisted. Marianne took the papers. She stamped them with a decisive thump. She checked the signatures. She placed one copy in front of my father and put the originals in her briefcase. "It is done," Marianne said. I looked at my family. They sat there, defeated, small, and bitter. They weren't grieving the loss of a daughter. They were grieving the loss of a resource. "Goodbye," I said. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the private room. Ethan, Grant, and Marianne followed me. We walked through the main dining room of the Monarch. I saw people laughing, eating, raising glasses of wine. I saw families celebrating. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel a pang of jealousy. I didn't feel the need to buy my way into that picture. We stepped out into the cool night air. The city lights of uptown Charlotte were bright and sharp. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, taking my hand. I took a deep breath. My bank account was lighter by thousands of dollars. My family tree had been pruned down to the roots. I had no safety net, no inheritance, and no parents to call on Sundays. But as I looked at the street stretching out in front of me, I realized I had never felt richer. "I am not just okay," I said, squeezing his hand. "I am free." I had paid the final bill, and the cost was worth every single penny. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey to get to this point, but I hope it inspires anyone feeling trapped to find their own exit. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I love reading about your corners of the world. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this message of freedom with even more people.